Federal transfers are never easy on families. My wife Julia understood the demands of my job, but our 10-year-old son Tyler struggled with each new school, each new set of neighbors, each new life we built only to eventually leave behind. When we received orders to relocate to Oakwood Estates, I promised them both that this time would be different. This neighborhood was upscale with manicured lawns, a community pool, and excellent schools. It seemed perfect on paper. The moving truck departed late afternoon on that first Saturday. I parked my work vehicle, a plain white van with no markings, in our driveway beside the family SUV. There was nothing remarkable about this van. Standard issue, government-assigned, and intentionally nondescript. I used it for fieldwork, surveillance, and transport of sensitive equipment. According to protocol, it remained under my supervision at all times, including nights and weekends. I was unpacking boxes in the garage when I felt it, that distinct sensation of being watched. A woman stood at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that stretched her features into a permanent look of disapproval. She wore a navy pantsuit despite the weekend, with a small gold pin affixed to her lapel. HOA President. "You must be Mr. Anderson," she said without offering her hand. "I am Patricia Winters, President of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association." She did not smile. Her eyes kept darting to my van with undisguised distaste. "Nice to meet you," I responded politely. "We are still getting settled in." "That vehicle cannot remain in your driveway," she announced, pointing at my van. "It violates our neighborhood covenant, Section 12, Paragraph 3. No commercial vehicles may be visible from the street." "It is not a commercial vehicle," I explained calmly. "It is my personal transportation." Patricia's eyebrows arched so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "It is an eyesore. It brings down property values. We have standards in Oakwood Estates." I noticed other neighbors pausing their weekend activities to observe our interaction. A man washing his car slowed his movements. A woman walking her dog lingered nearby, pretending to check her phone while obviously eavesdropping. They were awaiting the outcome, seeing if the newcomer would fall in line or cause problems. "I appreciate your concern," I said evenly, "but the van stays. It is properly registered and legally parked on my property." Patricia's lips thinned to a bloodless line. "We shall see about that, Mr. Anderson. Welcome to Oakwood Estates." She turned sharply and walked away, back rigid with indignation. The following morning, I found a printed violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper. "Notice of covenant violation," it proclaimed in bold letters. Below was a detailed citation, complete with the signature of Patricia Winters, HOA President, and a fine of $100 for improper vehicle storage, with an additional $50 daily penalty until compliance was achieved. I calmly removed the notice and took it inside. Julia looked worried when I showed it to her. "Should we just comply?" she asked. "We do not want to start trouble so soon." "No," I replied. "This is just the beginning. If we give in now, she will never stop." I carefully documented the notice, photographed my van in the driveway showing it violated no reasonable standards, and began a case file. That afternoon, I installed a security camera system covering our property, particularly focusing on the driveway and van. That evening, I watched from our front window as Patricia led a small group of neighbors past our house, gesturing animatedly toward my van, her face set in an expression of righteous anger. Their disapproving glances felt like physical weight. Tyler noticed too. "Dad, the neighbors do not like us," he whispered, standing beside me at the window. "They do not know us yet," I answered, "and some people fear what they do not understand." I did not tell him what I was beginning to suspect. Patricia Winters was more than just a nosy HOA president enforcing petty rules. There was something in her tone, in her persistence, that felt like a personal vendetta. Something about her demeanor suggested she enjoyed this power too much. I am a federal agent. I observe before I act. So I watched, I documented, and I waited. The campaign against me began in earnest during our second week at Oakwood Estates. Patricia, whom neighbors had taken to calling Karen behind her back, a nickname I found increasingly apt, operated with the precision of someone who had perfected the art of neighborhood tyranny. Monday morning, a citation for overgrown lawn appeared on my door. My grass was precisely 3½ inches tall, well within acceptable standards. Wednesday afternoon, a formal complaint about excessive noise after hours. We had been watching a movie with the volume at a reasonable level. Friday evening, a notice claiming my van had expired tags. The registration was valid for another 14 months. Each citation came with escalating fines and increasingly hostile language. Each was signed with the same flourishing signature, Patricia Winters, always with her title beneath it, as though the neighborhood could possibly forget who she was. Julia collected these notices in a folder, her face growing more concerned with each edition. "James, this is becoming harassment," she said. "Should you speak with your supervisor?" I nodded. I have already reported the situation. They advised discretion and documentation for now. What I did not tell Julia was how I had caught Patricia examining my van on 3 separate occasions. The first time, she walked past slowly, running her fingers along the paintwork as though checking for dust. The second time, she peered through the windows, shielding her eyes against the glare, attempting to see inside. The third time, she was testing the door handles. My security cameras captured each incident. I compiled the footage meticulously, building evidence of what was becoming an obvious fixation. When I confronted her during her third inspection, her reaction was immediate and extreme. "You have no right to sneak up on me like that," she shouted, though I had simply walked out my front door onto my own property. "You have no right to touch my vehicle," I countered calmly. "I am conducting an HOA inspection," she insisted, her voice rising to a pitch that attracted attention from neighboring houses. "This van is in violation of multiple covenants, and I have reason to believe you are operating a business from your home, which is strictly prohibited." "Please leave my property," I stated, maintaining an even tone despite her escalating behavior. "Are you threatening me?" she demanded, stepping toward me rather than away. "I will have you know that intimidating an HOA official is grounds for immediate legal action." I remained silent, which seemed to infuriate her more than any response could have. She stormed away, phone already pressed to her ear, voice carrying across lawns as she loudly explained to someone how the new resident is becoming dangerous. The neighborhood whispers grew louder after that confrontation. Parents pulled their children closer when Tyler approached at the community playground. Invitations to neighborhood gatherings mysteriously failed to reach our mailbox. Tyler came home from school one afternoon with red eyes, refusing to explain why until bedtime when he finally confessed that no one would sit with him at lunch. "They said their parents told them our house is being watched by the police," he said, his voice small in the darkness of his bedroom. I contacted my superior the next morning. Special Agent Donovan listened to my account without interruption. "Document everything," he advised. "If she escalates to property damage or more direct confrontation, we can consider options. For now, maintain your cover and continue observation." That afternoon, Patricia distributed a neighborhood-wide bulletin. Under the heading Security Alert, she detailed a series of suspicious activities occurring at my address, strongly implying criminal behavior without explicitly stating it. She urged neighbors to report any unusual vehicles, visitors, or behavior directly to her, not to local authorities. "The resident at 1542 Oakwood Drive appears to be operating outside neighborhood guidelines and possibly local laws," she wrote. "For the safety of our community, especially our children, remain vigilant." The bulletin included a photograph of my van, taken without permission from my driveway. That night, Julia found the notice in our mailbox and placed it wordlessly on the kitchen counter beside the others. Her hands trembled slightly. "This is not just about a van anymore, is it?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "It never was. Some people cannot stand what they cannot control." The spider had spun her web across the neighborhood. Now she was waiting for me to make a mistake. What Patricia did not realize was that I had been collecting every strand of her silk, documenting every move she made. The trap was not for me. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect early autumn day that normally would have found our family at the community park or planning a backyard barbecue. Instead, I spent the morning in our garage, organizing equipment in my van while Julia took Tyler to visit her sister in the next town over, a temporary escape from the increasingly hostile atmosphere of Oakwood Estates. The garage door was open, allowing fresh air to circulate as I carefully inventoried and secured various items of sensitive equipment. My back was to the driveway when I heard footsteps approaching, quick, determined steps on concrete. I turned just as Patricia Winters reached my van, her hand already extending toward the door handle. "What do you think you are doing?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet Sunday morning. She startled but did not retreat. Instead, she squared her shoulders and lifted her chin defiantly. "Community inspection," she announced. "As HOA president, I have the right to investigate suspected covenant violations." "You do not have the right to enter or search private property," I stated firmly. "Step away from the vehicle." "This van has been reported as potentially housing illegal substances or equipment," she declared loudly, clearly performing for any neighbors who might be watching. "I have received multiple complaints." Her hand closed around the door handle and tugged. The door was locked, but her intent was clear. I moved quickly, closing the distance between us and grasping her wrist firmly enough to remove her hand from my vehicle, but applying no pressure or force beyond what was necessary. "Remove your hand from my property immediately," I said. Patricia reacted as though I had struck her. She wrenched her arm away and stumbled backward, her face contorting in exaggerated pain and shock. "He assaulted me," she shrieked, her voice echoing down the quiet street. "Help, someone call the police." She fumbled for her phone, dropping it once before managing to dial 911. Her voice rose to a fevered pitch as she reported being under attack by the suspicious resident she had been monitoring. "He has attacked me on my own property," she lied, eyes darting around to the neighbors now emerging from their homes. "He is hiding contraband in that van. Send officers immediately." Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached our street. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of my house, and 4 officers emerged with weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them," one shouted, advancing cautiously. I complied immediately, raising my hands and standing perfectly still. "My identification is in my back pocket," I said calmly. "I am a federal agent." Patricia's triumphant expression faltered slightly as an officer approached me cautiously. "Slowly remove your identification with 2 fingers," he instructed. I did as directed, extracting my federal credentials and holding them out for inspection. The officer examined them carefully, then looked up at me with new understanding in his eyes. "Stand down," he called to his colleagues. "Federal agent." The shift in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. Weapons were holstered, postures relaxed. Patricia stood frozen, her face draining of color as one of the officers approached her. "Ma'am, did you attempt to access this vehicle?" he asked, his tone now professionally crisp. It violates our neighborhood covenant," she stammered. "Commercial vehicles are not." "This is an unmarked federal vehicle," the officer interrupted. "Did you attempt to open it without permission?" Neighbors had gathered on the street now, many recording the scene with their phones. Patricia's humiliation was complete and public, precisely what she had intended for me. "I was conducting an inspection," she insisted, her voice no longer carrying the authority it had minutes before. "Ma'am, tampering with federal property is a serious offense," the officer continued. "So is filing a false police report." As Patricia was led aside for further questioning, I noticed the neighbors' expressions changing. Some embarrassed, some curious, some suddenly reevaluating everything they thought they knew about the quiet family at 1542 Oakwood Drive. The incident lasted less than 30 minutes, but by its conclusion, the neighborhood's perception had undergone a seismic shift. The officers departed with apologies for the disturbance. Patricia was not arrested, merely warned about the seriousness of her actions, and the potential consequences should similar incidents occur. She left without speaking to anyone, hurrying to her house with her head down, no longer making eye contact with the neighbors who had so recently been her willing audience. The quiet that followed felt like the aftermath of a storm. Air cleared, but damage evident everywhere. I expected the incident to humble Patricia, to force her retreat or at least moderate her behavior. I underestimated both her pride and her determination. Rather than backing down, she doubled her efforts, transforming what had been petty harassment into something far more concerning. The first indication came Tuesday morning, when every household in Oakwood Estates received an emergency HOA bulletin in their mailboxes. The document, printed on official HOA letterhead, contained a stunning recharacterization of Sunday's events. "Resident threatens HOA official conducting routine inspection," the headline proclaimed. The bulletin went on to describe how I had physically intimidated Patricia while she performed her lawful duties as association president. It claimed my alleged federal credentials were under investigation and warned neighbors to remain vigilant about potential surveillance operations targeting innocent families. The bulletin concluded with a notice that the HOA board had unanimously approved a $500 fine against me for threatening behavior against an HOA official and continued covenant violations. Julia found the notice first and brought it to me, her hands shaking with anger. "This is slander," she said. "She is outright lying about what happened." "She is scared," I replied, examining the document. "This is desperate behavior." "She should be scared," Julia snapped. "She tried to break into a federal vehicle and called armed police to our home. Our son lives here, James." By that afternoon, rumors had spread throughout the neighborhood. Parents at school pickup whispered that my van contained surveillance equipment monitoring their activities. Someone claimed Patricia had evidence I was not actually employed by the FBI, but was using false credentials to intimidate residents. Another suggested I was under investigation myself and had been transferred here as punishment. That night, while we ate dinner, the distinct sound of something striking metal drew me to the window. A rock lay beside my van, and the passenger side mirror hung at an angle, shattered. A figure disappeared around the corner of the street, too quickly for identification, but the damage was done. Julia put Tyler to bed early, then came downstairs with determination in her eyes. "I want a transfer," she said flatly. "I cannot live like this. Tyler cannot live like this." "We cannot let her win," I argued. "If we leave, she continues this behavior with the next family who does not fit her vision." "I do not care about the next family," Julia responded, tears welling in her eyes. "I care about ours. How long before someone does worse than break a mirror? How long before Tyler gets hurt?" I took her hands in mine. "Give me 2 weeks," I said, 2 weeks to resolve this properly. "And if you cannot?" "Then we request a transfer, no questions asked." Julia studied my face, recognized my resolve, and nodded reluctantly. 2 weeks. That night, after Julia and Tyler were asleep, I made a decision that would change everything. Patricia Winters had crossed from petty harassment into something potentially criminal. Her actions now justified a more formal investigation. I contacted Special Agent Donovan and received authorization to open a preliminary file. Within the legal boundaries of my position and following all proper protocols, I began investigating Patricia Winters. I ran her name through federal databases, searched public records, and requested information from previous jurisdictions where she had resided. I installed additional security cameras around our property, all properly documented and warranted given the escalating situation. I placed a legal tracking device on my own van to record any further tampering attempts. My investigation had to remain completely by the book. One procedural misstep could jeopardize any case we might build and potentially compromise my position. But I would not be intimidated out of my home, nor would I allow my family to live in fear. The next morning, I found Patricia standing across the street, observing my house with unconcealed hostility. I raised my hand in greeting, a gesture that visibly unsettled her. She had expected fear or anger, not calm confidence. What Patricia did not realize was that she was no longer simply harassing a new neighbor who refused to comply with her arbitrary rules. She was now the subject of a federal investigation. Every move she made, every lie she spread, every action she took against my family was being methodically documented and evaluated. The hunter had become the hunted, and she had no idea. My investigation into Patricia Winters revealed a pattern so predictable it could have been a case study in abuse of power. Within days, I uncovered a history that explained her behavior, but in no way excused it. Patricia had served as HOA president in 3 previous communities over the past decade. Each tenure ended abruptly, with minimal public explanation. In her most recent position before Oakwood Estates, she had been quietly removed following a closed settlement with a homeowner, the records sealed by mutual agreement. Further investigation revealed dozens of petty lawsuits filed by Patricia against neighbors and community members. Most were dismissed, but the financial and emotional toll on her targets was substantial. One family had been driven to near bankruptcy, fighting her claims that their autistic child's therapy equipment in their backyard violated aesthetic standards. The most disturbing discovery came when I examined the Oakwood Estates HOA financial records, which were publicly available to all homeowners, though few ever requested access. Over the past 18 months, Patricia had approved dozens of maintenance invoices from Evergreen Landscaping Services for work throughout the community, special projects, emergency repairs, and routine maintenance beyond the standard contracted services. Evergreen Landscaping Services existed only on paper. The business address led to a post office box registered to Martin Winters, Patricia's cousin. The company had no employees, no equipment, no legitimate business operation. It was a shell created for the sole purpose of siphoning HOA funds into the Winters family accounts. The scheme was both simple and brazen. Patricia would identify a maintenance need, approve the expenditure as HOA president, issue payment to Evergreen, and then share the proceeds with her cousin. Over 18 months, they had embezzled nearly $86,000 from their neighbors. I presented my findings to Special Agent Donovan, who authorized a formal investigation. With internal approval, we prepared a carefully orchestrated operation to document the fraud and build an airtight case. I installed additional cameras on my property, all properly warranted, to capture any further harassment or property damage. I requested financial records from previous HOA boards where Patricia had served, finding similar patterns of questionable expenditures and mysterious service providers. At the monthly HOA meeting, which I attended for the first time since moving in, I recorded Patricia as she presented the latest budget report, specifically noting 3 new invoices from Evergreen Landscaping for storm damage repair, totaling $12,400. No storms had occurred in our area for months. Throughout the meeting, Patricia repeatedly cast suspicious glances in my direction, her discomfort at my presence evident to everyone. When I politely asked for clarification about certain expenditures, she tersely suggested I submit questions in writing and moved quickly to the next agenda item. After the meeting, a neighbor named Robert approached me in the parking lot. "You are asking dangerous questions," he said quietly. "The last treasurer who questioned Patricia's reports found his car vandalized the next day. Coincidence," she claimed. "Do others share these concerns?" I asked. Robert glanced around nervously. "Many do, none speak up. It is not worth the trouble she can cause." "What if there was proof of wrongdoing?" I pressed. "Would people stand together then?" "Proof," Robert laughed bitterly. "Against Patricia, she controls everything, the records, the meetings, the board votes. Nothing happens in Oakwood Estates without her approval." "Everything leaves a trail," I replied. "Even the most careful people make mistakes." As I walked away, I could feel Robert watching me, a mixture of fear and hope in his expression. The neighborhood had been under Patricia's thumb for too long. They needed someone to stand up, someone she could not intimidate or outmaneuver. The case was building, piece by methodical piece. Patricia Winters had created a perfect system of control and profit. But perfect systems are often the most vulnerable when they finally face real scrutiny. 2 weeks to the day after I promised Julia a resolution, I called for a special community meeting. The flyers delivered to every home in Oakwood Estates were simple. Important financial concerns, emergency HOA meeting, Saturday, 10 a.m., community clubhouse, all homeowners urged to attend. Patricia called within an hour of the flyer's distribution, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "You have no authority to call an HOA meeting," she snapped. "All meetings must be approved by the board." "The bylaws permit emergency meetings called by petition," I replied calmly. "I have collected the required signatures." This was true. My quiet conversations with concerned neighbors like Robert had yielded more support than even I had anticipated. Years of suspicion and resentment had created a reservoir of distrust toward Patricia that needed only a small outlet to begin flowing. "This is inappropriate and possibly illegal," she threatened. "I will be consulting our attorney." "Please do," I responded. "In fact, legal representation might be advisable for you at this point." Saturday morning arrived with tension hanging over the neighborhood like a thundercloud. The community clubhouse filled beyond capacity, with homeowners standing along walls and spilling out onto the patio. Patricia arrived precisely at 10 a.m., flanked by 2 board members who served as her most reliable allies. She took her customary seat at the head table, arranging her papers with exaggerated precision, her face a mask of professional indignation. The room quieted as I walked to the front, placing my own folder on the podium. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I have called this meeting to address serious financial concerns regarding the management of our HOA funds." "This is out of order," Patricia interrupted immediately. "Mr. Anderson has no standing to—" "I believe we should hear what he has to say," Robert called from the back, his voice stronger than I had ever heard it. I nodded my thanks and continued. "For the past 18 months, substantial amounts of money have been paid to a company called Evergreen Landscaping Services for work that was either never performed or grossly overcharged." I distributed copies of the financial records I had compiled, all legally obtained through proper channels. Evergreen Landscaping Services does not exist as a legitimate business. It is registered to Martin Winters, a relative of our HOA president. The room erupted. Some residents stood, shouting accusations. Others defended Patricia, claiming I was manufacturing a scandal out of personal vendetta. Through it all, Patricia sat rigidly in her chair, eyes fixed on me with pure hatred. When the noise subsided slightly, I continued. "I have documented transfers from the HOA account to Evergreen and subsequent transfers from Evergreen to personal accounts. In total, approximately $86,000 of your money has been misappropriated." A woman in the front row gasped. "That is why our dues increased last year to fund this theft." Before Patricia could respond, the clubhouse door opened. Special Agent Donovan entered, his badge clearly visible on his belt. He nodded to me and took a position near the wall. "Who is that?" someone demanded. "My colleague," I replied. "Special Agent Donovan, FBI Financial Crimes Division." The room fell silent, Patricia's face drained of all color. "This is absurd," she finally managed, her voice barely audible. "This is a setup. He has been targeting me since he arrived." She stood abruptly, gathering her papers with trembling hands. "I will not sit here and be slandered by—" "Patricia Winters," Agent Donovan interrupted, stepping forward. "We need to speak with you regarding the financial discrepancies identified in the Oakwood Estates accounts." She bolted for the door, but found her path blocked by homeowners who no longer cowered before her authority. Agent Donovan approached calmly. "Ma'am, we can discuss this here or at our office. Your choice." Patricia's shoulders sagged in defeat. No handcuffs were necessary, no dramatic arrest, just the complete and public dismantling of the facade she had maintained for years. As she was escorted out, the silence in the room gave way to a collective exhalation. as though the entire neighborhood could finally breathe freely again. Patricia Winters resigned from the HOA board the following day through a terse email that offered no apologies or explanations. Criminal charges were filed by the district attorney's office a week later. As part of her plea agreement, she was permanently barred from serving in any HOA or community governance position. The transition was not immediate. Some residents, particularly those who had aligned themselves closely with Patricia, remained suspicious of me and my motives. Others approached hesitantly, offering awkward thanks or apologizing for their silence during the months of harassment my family had endured. Robert was elected interim HOA president, his first official act being the dissolution of all outstanding fines and violations issued during Patricia's tenure. "We are starting fresh," he announced at his first meeting, "with transparency and actual community input." The change in our neighborhood was subtle at first, then increasingly evident. Julia noticed it first, the wave from a neighbor who had previously hurried past our house with averted eyes. Then came an invitation for Tyler to join the community swim team. Small gestures that signaled acceptance, perhaps even respect. One evening, I returned home to find an envelope in our mailbox containing handmade cards from several neighborhood children, including one that read, "Sorry people were mean to you. Thanks for stopping the bad lady." Tyler proudly displayed them on his bedroom wall. My van remained parked in our driveway, no longer the subject of scrutiny or complaint. Occasionally, I would notice someone glancing at it as they passed, not with suspicion now, but with a kind of reverence, as though it represented something more than simple transportation. It had become a symbol of standing firm against intimidation. Julia commented on the change one evening as we sat on our front porch. "It is strange," she said. "A month ago, I could not imagine staying here. Now it feels like we might actually belong." "People respect honesty," I replied, "and they respect those who stand up to bullies even if they cannot do it themselves." We remained in Oakwood Estates. My transfer request was withdrawn. Tyler made friends at school. Julia joined the community garden committee. I continued my work, coming and going in my plain white van that no one dared to touch or question. Sometimes I think about Patricia Winters, about the system of fear and control she constructed so carefully only to watch it collapse around her. I think about how easy it would have been to request a transfer, to walk away, to surrender to her pressure. The path of least resistance is always tempting. But that is not who I am. Not as an agent, not as a neighbor, not as a father. The most important lessons I learned from this experience had nothing to do with law enforcement protocols or investigation techniques. They were about patience, about gathering evidence methodically rather than reacting emotionally, about knowing when to observe and when to act. And perhaps most importantly, about how sometimes the most powerful weapon against those who abuse their authority is simply refusing to be intimidated, standing firmly until the truth cannot be denied any longer. My van still sits in our driveway, clean, whole, and untouched. A quiet reminder that sometimes justice comes not through dramatic confrontation, but through patient, methodical pursuit of the truth.